Welcome back to Return to Heart. In this conversation, we take a high-level look at the intersection of faith, recovery, and transformation, examining how the 12 steps integrate with discipleship. Let's get started.
I want us to hit something today that, for me, in this hand, I had the most misunderstanding about and what I thought it was and who I thought it was for, okay? But in this hand, ended up becoming a life jacket that saved me from drowning, okay? So again, I probably judged it. I probably had a stereotype about what it was. I totally misunderstood it. Thought in some ways it was like not even like connected to the church or to my faith, and didn't know. But yet, at one point, then became, oh my goodness, like it kept me from drowning and taught me how to live, and actually taught me how to live the way that my faith had been wanting me to learn how to live the whole time.
Yeah.
And even the underpinning of how it was established for a reason within the context of the church by men of faith, for a reason, the way they did it. And now I would just say it's been one of the beautiful parts of my life that I have a lot of gratitude for, but I think for many years, probably judged it as good for somebody else. Like, I didn't say it was all, I was just kind of, I'm glad there's a place like that for people.
For them.
But then I realized it was a place like that for me. And we're going to talk about the 12 steps.
12 steps.
Yeah, the 12 steps for me saved my life, really. And, I came to this place 18 years ago where I loved the church. I am a local churchman. I still am a pastor today, been a pastor. And yet, 18 years ago, found myself as lost as they could come and just as addicted as it could come. And I had an idea what discipleship was for you, but didn't do discipleship for myself. And like you said, I'll never forget going into my very first 12-step meeting and quietly judging it for sure. And then I got to treatment the next Monday and outwardly judge it, and that didn't go so well. But I began to find myself in this place of like...
No, you're better than all those people.
Yeah,
right.
I'm not as sick as those people. But I began to realize this place has really given me a lot of hope and freedom and healing. And yet there was something missing. There was just something about it missing. And then when I got out of treatment, I was going back to church and just really involved in my local church. I had been fired from the very church I was going to. And I'd sit on a Sunday morning and be like, man, there's something here that's missing from here, and vice versa. And so I just began to pray and cry out, God, how do these two things
hold hands?
How do they hold hands? Because what I'm learning in the 12 steps, this is really, really discipleship, but there was a lack of the gospel. And for me, the church had the gospel, but was lacking steps to help guide me to a place of like, oh, this is really what Jesus meant, that I've come to give you life and life to the full. And the 12 steps for me have been that place, and still to this day. I do think it's like you said, I think it's the greatest discipleship tool that was ever invented by two guys like us.
That were in the church. Trying to get sober and wanting others to get sober with them.
And couldn't until they...
I think that story would be good to tell.
Yeah. Go for it. You know the story of Bill W.
Bill and Bob.
Oh, how it came about.
Yeah.
Well, I heard it secondhand, but I heard it from an eyewitness.
Okay.
So I was so sorry about that.
We looked at you because you're the oldest one. No, I'm kidding. We looked at you because maybe you were there when it started in 1940.
I would like the record to show that Jeff Schulte is 23 days older than
you.
me.
I know. I'm the oldest guy sitting here. Keep going. All right.
So,
Grandpa.
I was my favorite titles actually. Bill Wilson, and Dr. Bob Smith developed AA and the steps, and the rumor had always been, yeah, these are biblical. These came from Scripture. And then as time went on, some changes were made, and suddenly there was this drift that both of you have already very eloquently spoken of. There was this drift, and I heard Todd often says the phrase, "I want them to hold hands." And a friend of mine said, not a friend of mine, he's a mentor of mine whom I've never met, an author. He wrote a book called Grace and Addiction. And he said, would it be that the church on one side of the street and the AA building on the other side would reach across and shake hands with each other?
Oh, yeah.
And so very similar to what you said. But so Bill W.'s son, Bob Smith's son, his nickname was Smitty, was a friend of mine.
Wow.
And this friend of mine said he knew Smitty very well, and Smitty said to him, "Let me tell you how this happened. I would come down the stairs at my home in Akron, Ohio, and my dad, Dr. Bob, they called him.
From the big blue book for AA, that Dr. Bob.
And Mr. Wilson, Bill Wilson, would be sitting in the dining room of my home, and my mother would be reading to them out of 1st and 2nd Corinthians and the book of James and the Beatitudes." He said, "I watched the 12 steps develop, and that's where they came from."
Oh, man.
And so that story's secondhand to me.
That's pretty close.
But I've heard him tell that story, and I was just thinking as y'all were talking here, I usually make a beeline for the brain, and the brain is made for stimulation. We like new things. We like learning things, seeing things, going places, finding out answers to questions. And children, they're very curious. They love to know things. Stimulation, they love that, and structure. We're made to have structure around the stimulation. And what addiction does, classic addiction, chemical addiction, sex addiction, and not so classical addiction, workaholism, rage, control, accomplishment, they have one thing in common. They replace stimulation with chaos, and they replace structure with rigidity. And so what the steps do, we used to say this where we were treatment, that we break hearts open, and we break hearts open by giving men, and again, it was a men's treatment center, obviously it's true for ladies too. We break hearts open of these men, and the contents of that broken heart pour into a mold, and there are 12 of them, and they are the 12 steps. And when they're poured into that structured mold, then we're able to pay attention to reconciling that man, him to God, and him to those he loves. So that to me is the beauty of the 12 steps, is that much like Scripture, of course the 12 steps are not Scripture, but the Scripture those 12 steps come from are such a beautiful step-by-step model that actually go in a circle, not a straight line. The 12-step is a picture of the Great Commission to send the message forward. You can be in recovery by the grace of God. And then that takes me, when I say that to someone, it takes me back to, oh yeah, and I was really powerless over this thing that drove me into that chaos.
Wow.
So good.
I think we could do, and maybe we will if there's an interest in it, we could do a whole series of these podcasts just talking through all 12 steps. I think today it's just kind of do a flyover.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just do a flyover. Let's talk through what they are, okay? And then kind of what's it look like to do them? And then we can kind of wrap it in at the end. But I think it'd be good just to kind of describe them. Like, what are the 12 steps?
Yeah. Todd, before you answer that, start in with that, I mean, you've done it. You have gone to a large church, and you have created a 12-step based ministry that is still going.
In the church.
In the church. And so if you would, before you kind of start talking about the steps, you took those 12 steps, so to speak, in your hands, and you walked in to the church you had been fired from.
Yeah.
And you said, all right, fellas, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put these steps out here, and I'd like to base a ministry on the Bible these came out of and these themselves. And so before you talk about the steps themselves, how did that church relate to you on those 12 steps?
Great question.
Yeah, I think it took about a year and a half of just, this is not figurative, this is literally, I was cutting grass every Friday at the place that fired me. And it just began to be birthed in there. Out of that, like I was going to this again, a meeting every day for 2 years.
12-step meeting.
A 12-step meeting every day. And then I'd go to church on Sunday in a small group sometime. And I was just like, gosh, these things are two things that I hold so dear. And so I just began to pray and pray and pray. And out of that came, I was listening to a pastor out of Dallas, Texas. And they had just finished the first time I'd ever heard of a 12-step biblical model. There was Celebrate Recovery. They do great work. But even they're not a 12-step model. And I was like, there's got to be something out there that brings Christ into this fold. And so it was a year and a half of praying and thinking and praying and thinking. And then I ended up on a plane to Dallas to have a conversation with the little writer that wrote that. And then out of that, he kind of said, here, take this. But it was a place for me to get in now into the 12 steps. I was looking for a place that would, and these are what the 12 steps did, help me with me. I think that's the first few steps. Help me with others, and then help me with God. And the church was helping me with God. The 12 steps were helping me with others, but I needed the others and God piece together. That's what I could not find that. And so, yeah, me, God, and others is really what the 12 steps are all about. When you split them apart, it's those, and you can see how they wrote it, how they did it. It's pretty amazing.
Well, here's where most of us are. We find ourselves like staring off in this abyss of how do I move forward? Like, how do I deal with these issues? How do I, it's one thing for me just to try to white knuckle to stop some kind of compulsive behavior. But how do I actually take incremental, I'm going to say this, small steps that are big steps, but that's what they are. They're small steps that are big steps, but there's it's almost like guardrails on a road, like in little steps to take to go, okay, what's the next step? Not like what's the 20th step or the 12th in this case, but like one time a guy said to me early on in my recovery, he said, man, you just need more God. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, good orderly direction. G-O-D, you need some good orderly direction, as in you need somebody to help you, take you by the hand and help you take one step forward in the right direction. Because you've been running in the wrong direction. Okay, maybe you can limp a step at a time in a healthier direction. Yeah. And the steps are those. They're not easy, but you don't do them alone, but they're just, I say this, I hate even say it this way, they're just a step, but they're big steps that lead to the next step, which lead to the next step. And then you said this, Phil, and we'll get to this. When you get to the 12th step basically says you have to keep giving this away to keep it, which leads you back to the first step again.
That's right.
So that's the circle that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think what you just said is, I don't know where I heard this, so it's not original to me. The steps are simple, but they're not easy.
Ooh.
For
It's
sure.
super simple. I mean, the structure that the 12-step gave me, it was simple.
Structure.
It was structure.
Break it down.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'd been to school, education, preached for a long time, knew the Bible. I knew what discipleship was.
Yeah.
But, man, the simplicity of the 12 steps for me, like, and that first one, like, it gave confession and admission. It made way more sense to me than ever before. So they're super simple. But they're not easy.
Not easy. But I'm going back to this again. And this is another way I remember I was confronted with this. Jeff, I know you're smart. Jeff, I know you figured out a lot of how to get through life. But your best thinking got you in a treatment center, almost blowing up your family, and got you fired from a church you started. Yeah. So let's just look at that for a second. Let's just let the data speak for itself. That's what your best thinking got you. Now, it doesn't mean your whole life was garbage. It does mean that your best thinking was not always good thinking. Because the mind of an addict, it always makes sense to him that this is what's the next thing to do. And the compulsive behavior is the next thing to do. So let's break this down to go, these are actually the next steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
And they are the good orderly direction. I love the acronym even because I did experience, and we do experience more of God, because it really is just a very, it's not a formula, but is a simplified, directional, guided with somebody, with other men or women, movement towards surrender, which is a word we all love, but none of us know what it means. Certainly, we don't know how to surrender, and it actually guides you into a place of surrender and an experience with God.
Yeah.
Part of the brilliance of what actually both of you are talking about, part of the simplicity, part of the communal aspect of it is we've talked all the time, because that's what 10 Men does, is we help restore people, soul transformation, and restore people back into community and into relationship. And notice how we've talked before, addiction is about connectivity. And we know we need to be part of a system, a ritualized system. And I've taught the steps for 30 years. And every time I teach them, I think without exception, I say, do not ever teach a step. Each step comes from somewhere. Each step is going somewhere.
Yes.
And so part of the simplicity is it matches the brain's desire for ritual and pattern and cadence. And it matches our innate God-given identity for a systematic movement
Structural
relationship.
Yeah.
And so step 0 is the story. And I tell my story and go, yep, I'm powerless over a number of things. And so I have to make that admission in step 1, which opens the door to being able to recognize, I've been fragmented or insane. And there is a God who is the storehouse to restore me to sanity, to sanus, to wholeness. And now I'm integrated, in the process of being integrated. Now I look up and go, there's God. There he is. I thought I lost him. Now that I'm an integrated whole again, I can see him clearly. And so I'm going to turn my care over to him. And once I'm safely in God's arms.
That was step 3 right there.
Yeah, step 3. Yep. And as I'm safe in his arms,
right there,
I get to articulate 3 major categories. Articulate harms done to me, harms that I have done, and a sexual inventory. That particular harm, Todd has mentioned in previous podcasts about how sexual sin affects us in a way other sins don't. They're embodied. And so that the sexual inventory is part of a 4th step is pivotal there. And I remember I did my first 4th step. I went, man, I'm so glad that's over. I don't know what I was thinking, but it didn't occur to me to actually read the 5th step. My old crusty sponsor said, well, now we're going to do a 5th step. I'm like, man, good. I'm thinking, glad that's over with.
And maybe I can go confront those people that were part of those that harmed me. Yeah.
I can't wait for the good part. He goes, you go read me your 4th step. No, I'm not. He said, that's the 5th step, son. And I'm like, okay. So that 5th step is where I move into that territory. And I'm sitting across from the sponsor going, okay, way back when I told my story 0, and then I recognized my powerlessness over this disaster, and then I'm being restored to wholeness, to sanity. I turned the care of my life over to God once I got some wholeness, and I wrote all this stuff down. I've done to me, sexual history, and now I'm going to say this. Like, you mean like out loud? Yes. And so those first 5 are the ones that set us up to where isn't it a grace of God in the development of those steps that we get to do all those things first before we're so vulnerable to do it with somebody else. Mm-hmm. There's the structure and the community and the system and the ritual around doing it. Even God in his wisdom, even in the 12 steps, it's so often, sadly, historically, the church has cast aspersions on, I was with y'all, kind of judgment, that kind of thing. But failing to recognize, God lets us start with that 0 step and works us kindly and gently, not easily, to the place to where we're secure in him and going, okay, write it now, say it.
Say it out loud.
Keep going.
In the 6th step, the 6th and 7th and 8th steps are kind of, if you put all 3 of those steps together, they're like, okay, continue. We would call it sanctification. Continue paying attention to this God that you need so desperately to walk you through this. And the 9th step is now I'm ready to go to Jeff and to Todd and to other people and go, hey, I need to name what I did. And I'm really, really sorry. It's called making amends. It's like I want to make amends to you for what I did or said or failed to do I said I would do. That's a very powerful experience. And man, again, the grace of God, you mean God is so gracious to me that I get 8 steps
to get you to 9.
prepare to say I'm sorry. Man, what a grace that is in the steps. And then 10th and 11th step are, again, we will call the maintenance steps, to say, okay, I want to stay consciously in contact with him. I want to make sure I'm paying attention of my need of sanctification. That thing that Paul was talking about being in anguish for, Christ's likeness, being formed in his image, that I want to keep in conscious contact, to keep having those shortcomings ferreted out of me. And then that 12th step, like, I'm going to take this message that I've been given by the grace of God and a patient sponsor and a community around me of other recovering people in a gospel-centered way. I'm going to take that message forward, and every time I do it, I go, yep, that's me. And powerlessness, and here we go again and again and again, and then reinforcing that structure.
In any relationship I've ever been in, friends, family, anybody, I found one of the hardest things to do, and I watch it myself, is to take ownership, okay, of anything that I've done to harm you, okay? And I think there's some fear there, somehow it can be rooted in a lot of things, but somehow it's like, if I really do lay vulnerable on the mat and give you an opening, you're going to come from the top rope probably and drive me through the ground, okay? Or so there's a vulnerability to making an amends. I don't know if there's anything like it in a relationship, but when I'm in a relationship with somebody that can freely do that, like own things, own their side of the street, I'm going to say this. When I see it or I experience it with somebody, there may be nothing more attractive or attaching in a relationship. And most of the time when I'm around somebody that does or can, if I pull a thread, there's some 12-step work behind that for that particular person that gave them enough practice to getting from the 8th to the 9th that they've learned how to live in a sense of being able to own things, so that the repair that had a rupture there can be some repair. Or the relationship that had the rupture can have some repair. And I'm just saying this to say, most of the people that I know that are able to do that with their spouses or their children or even with their parents or friends, there's a whole lot of time when I go, that person had some practice.
Yes.
And it happened in a 12-step room with a sponsor or some other guys or gals in 12-step. And so I just go, it's just a data or something I've just noticed over time to go, man, that guy or gal didn't learn how to do that from where he came from. Because most of us, we look and go, I know how many guys I've met with that say they can't even recall a parent ever apologizing for anything. Ever. Like, can I ever recall a parent saying, gosh, son, please forgive me for that, and being specific. And I go, most of us don't ever see that or have that. So it's a miracle that we learn how to do it. But 12 steps has taught me how to do that imperfectly. But my kids will tell you, a lot of what I have with my adult grown children has become a result of me learning how to do this. But I learned that by doing 12 steps that I was forced into by the unmanageability of my life from my addictive behavior that got me into a 12-step meeting that then got me working steps with a sponsor.
Yes.
So true.
Yes. I was not too long ago in a meeting, and I mean, I'll say this with all humility, probably the most epic little sermonette ever delivered. It was just, I mean.
You gave it.
Well, yeah.
By the way, you're a gifted teacher. Yeah,
He is a gifted teacher.
Yeah. Podcast Phil Hernon, you come up with some good stuff. Well, Google Phil Hernon, you come up with some good stuff.
Dude,
anyway,
this was, the room was tense.
I'm dogging you.
And I delivered this,
Spurgeonous?
Charlie probably would have been decently close to this. So, and in the room it's tense, and I was handed some things. This group of people needed to confront me about some things, and some of the content was not exactly, at least the way I recall the content. I was there on behalf of another team of people, and so I, for lack of a better term, owned some things, that pushback. And despite my amazing, I would say epic sermonette that I delivered, the feedback I received, 100% of it was not about the epic talk. It was about, thank you so much for just saying you're sorry. And for admitting the missteps. And it's like not a word
about what you said.
About the big speech.
I want to say this about your teaching, because I've heard you teach quite a bit. and I just say sort of the magic behind it is I'll hear you teach in some setting, and I watch people respond to it. And I mean, you're really gifted with your exposition of the scriptures, but I also hear a whole lot of 12-step how to live life integration with that most people sitting out in a church audience who maybe have never been to a 12-step meeting, didn't know if the 12 steps, if it hit them on the side of the head.
Yeah. And
they're getting it through the way you teach sometimes. And I go, they don't realize this, but what they just loved about what they just heard is what we're talking about here, which is what's kind of embedded in these 12 steps.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's just funny about you, but I hear you do that all the time as much as I've ever heard anybody do it.
Yes. It's an example, and you two are the same. It's an example of once something gets in you, it can't help but come out of you when you're doing what you're made to do.
Yeah.
And that you guys have seen it. One of the offices in the treatment center had a small little frame above the light switch, and it said, the rabbi said to the students, I'm going to place some things on your heart. And the student said to the rabbi, please, Rabbi, place them in my heart. And the rabbi said, no, only when your heart breaks and they begin to take seed, to take nurture. And that's in other words, when it gets in you, it will blossom. But only then. And that's an example of how the 12 steps get into. And you call them friends of Bill, the old school term. But you really can, when you're with someone long enough, whether they're teaching or just in a conversation, you can go,
he's a friend of Bill's.
I bet this is a friend of Bill.
Friend of Bill. It's so funny because I know for me, even in my own recovery the last 20 years, I can go to an ACA meeting, which is all about codependence and feel right at home. I'll say this: alcohol has never been a way that I've medicated. It's just never been something that was my magic. Okay, I've been to hundreds of AA meetings.
Yeah,
and here's what I love about it, and this is why I would go. It's good for me to sit in a room with other men and women that are surrendering and talking about powerlessness over something.
Yes.
And I just feel at home there, even though I'm not dealing with alcohol.
That's right.
And I think that the bad rap sometimes that the 12 steps will get is even when they start talking about God, they'll describe this as the God of your understanding. Talk about that for a minute, because I think that gets so blown up. Like, wait a minute, that's where the 12 steps is totally, we're not talking about Jesus in the meeting. So how is this at all godlike? And how am I going to meet God in this meeting? Because it's the God of your understanding. There's a whole lot of gods in that quote unquote meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to talk about that and address that head on.
Yeah.
I think back to your question a few moments ago to me, like, how did the church deal with the 12 steps? And I think that's the biggest one. The rest of them are like, yeah, this is great. But that's the one. That's the one.
What's the problem that they have with that? Or how would you address that? How would you answer that question?
Well, I just take them back to how it was originally written by the original authors. They were godly men that loved the Lord and, got hijacked like everything else in the world. When where the truths of God are, the world wants to hijack it. And once the world hijacks it, that's what happens. But if you go to the original source, the original two men, they did speak about Jesus. And then once the world got a hold of it, you have to kind of, for the church, that's where you got to start. You got to start with that story of who they were. And even now, the way I kind of tell people is, for me, they ask me all the time, well, how do you do that now, Todd? Like, you're a pastor, you're a believer, you love the Lord, you teach. I said, well, it is the God of my understanding. It's going to be the God of your understanding. It's going to be the God of your understanding. And the way we even understand the God of the Bible is going to be uniquely different because of our unique stories. So, yes, I have a conceptualization in my brain biblically of who God is, but I also have my story that shapes who God is.
Okay, which is, to me, that point right there, I know what the Bible says about God, but I've got a story that colors that. One of the things I love about the God of your own understanding is because some of the journey for me was having to jettison the way I interpreted God through my story that was not God at all.
Yeah.
Now, it might have biblical language around it, but I didn't experience grace and mercy and forgiveness through admission and connection and attachment in my life like what I experienced the first time, second time, third time, and thousandth time that I walked into a 12-step meeting.
Yes.
And so then all of a sudden I began to experience God in a way that's actually more biblical okay, than the way I was experiencing before with all my seminary degrees and education and all that, Greek, Hebrew, everything. And I'm going, wait a minute, I'm experiencing the God I've been reading about in this meeting and through these steps, and then through people's response relationally with me doing these 12 steps, making an amends to a child or to a spouse or to a friend. I'm experiencing something that was re-educating me to the real God that's been trying to reveal himself to me the whole time.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And that's the other piece for me. I think it's freeing for someone that comes from a really strong Christian religious background to walk into a meeting and go, wait a minute. I may have to jettison who I made God to be and actually start to learn how to embrace the God that the Bible does describe. And by the way, I'm going to sit next to a guy that thinks that doorknob is God. Right. I'm okay with that because truth is, he may have more surrender than me right now, and I need to learn from him so that I can experience more of a God who's, in my view, a real God.
Yes. Yes.
The other way for me, how it kind of more for me was really the 12-step meetings for me became a place that I could be a missionary in. Take the God of the Bible, the God of my understanding. And with SA, it's way easier than AA, in my opinion, because SA guys' sobriety length is very hard to come by. And so I could go into a room with my sobriety, and they would ask, well, yeah, I want you to be my sponsor. How'd you do it? Well, I only have one way to do it. It's the God of the Bible. And if you want what I have, I can give you what I have. If you don't want that, that's up to you. And so it really, for me, the teaching point for me with the church was like, let's take the gospel to the secular world, what we were taught to do. Like, it's what Paul did, right, in Acts. Like, hey, I see you're talking about all these gods. Let me tell you about this unknown God, this unnamed God. But I could do that because of what God had done for me in my own sobriety.
One of the greatest gifts that I had in early recovery and 12-step was sitting in a meeting, a 12-step meeting, and looking across the room at a guy who had 40 years of sobriety. And Body was legendary. Like, he's all over the world in that program.
He is
Legendary. And I remember looking at him, and by the way, we don't have a common faith, okay? But he knew how to work with religious guys. In fact, that was part of his story. And I remember watching him and going, what I know is this. I mean, he wasn't. I remember he looked 100 years old to me. I don't know how old he was at the time, but I just remember this guy's old. He couldn't hardly see. His glasses were about this thick. And I'm looking at this guy going, he's got something I want.
Yeah.
Surrender.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember calling him after a meeting and saying, would you sponsor me? And by the way, he worked with across the board other religious guys that don't share the God of Jesus, okay? But man, that guy, I called that man every day for 4 years.
Yeah.
And he taught me how to surrender.
Yeah. That's right.
And I got more God through this man than I've gotten in a lot of places. And so I started looking, I go, I just want to blow that whole thing up. I'm glad we talked about this. I go,
so good.
But I could have looked at that and go, wait a minute, he doesn't know Jesus. He can't help me.
Yeah.
And I'm going, no, he had something that I didn't have.
I think a great place for us to end on time here that captures a lot of this.
No, we got another hour.
Is, I have told myself in meetings, like, okay, there's a scene in Scripture, and I think it's a good place to end, is there are two men, they're standing in the street, and one of them is a Pharisee, and he has got his act together like crazy. And the other one is a tax collector. He's a turncoat, he's a traitor, he's a betrayer, he's a sellout, he's a coward. And the guy that had it all together said, man, God, thank you for not making me like that schmuck. And then the other man said, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And that to me is like, I'm going to be one of those two guys as I do these 12 steps. Which one will it be?
That's right.
And so I would love to leave on that note to just say, these 12 steps teach me that, hey, you know what? I'm the tax collector. And God's been merciful to me, a great sinner. So good. Fun time.
And I pay attention to this as we're ending. I know I told you we're going to keep, no, I'm just joking. I feel the lightness, the physical lightness of that story, of that admission, of that statement.
Yeah.
To say, no, I'm the tax collector. And to admit that, and to be able to be in a place where I can with other people that can also talk about it. like even when you did that, I just felt like, gosh, that's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And the gospel better be that free.
Yeah.
And it better be, or it's not good news.
That's right.
So that is a great way to end. So
True,
we'll stop there. I'm
True
just joking
12-step
about going forever, but we
true
can, you know
12-step
what, we'll
recovery.
do a whole series on
Yeah.
on this. But this is a great flyover today.
That's great.
All right, thanks, guys.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thanks again for joining us on Return to Heart. To access resources mentioned on this program or to find out more about Tin Man Ministries, please go to tinman.org.